Hello, everyone. So we are back today. I hope that I'm audible. Let me quickly see if the stream is up. Perfect. Cool. So the topic for today is advanced Python. All right. But before we dive into it, let us quickly recap what we have covered so far. And then we will dive into what other things Python offers and where to go and how to learn those things. And there will also be a really nice announcement towards the end for the next series that is coming up. All right. Cool. So let me quickly share my screen over here. So this is the repository for all the past lectures that we have covered so far. So it is on GitHub, Skiller Academy / Intro to Python. All right. Now if you go over there, you will be able to find all the previous lecture notes and links to the videos that we have covered so far. So the lecture notes for today are over here in lecture 7. All right. So let us quickly recap what we have covered so far. All right. So let me zoom in my screen slightly. Okay, so this is what we have covered so far in the previous lectures. So we started with Python as a calculator, right? We saw how to install Python, how to treat Python, and what all simple things Python provides, right? We started by doing it in REPL.it, which is an online compiler, and then we installed Python on our systems. We went through the basic data types, so things like integers, floats, booleans, complex strings, and so on, right? We also looked at containers, so we looked at tuples. We looked at lists, dictionaries, and sets, and how and where to use them, right? Finally, we looked at some arithmetic operators and some logical operators, right? We saw how to do simple arithmetic, plus minus multiplication divide, and some logical operations. We looked at flow control things like if-else statements, while loops, for loops, right? We saw how to break from a loop, how to continue in a loop. So that is all the stuff that we saw. Perfect. Finally, after that, we went into functions, right? So we have seen some functions before this. So we saw the functions like dir, we have seen functions like print, we have seen functions like the range function. But now in functions, we actually saw how to define our own functions and how to call functions, how to provide the parameters, what different ways of providing parameters does Python allow, right? So optional arguments, default arguments, keyword arguments, a lot of different variety over there. Then we saw how to organize our code in different files across different packages. And we saw how to do basic dependency management, right? So how to install a virtual environment and how to basically install dependencies inside a virtual environment, right? How to activate and deactivate that. Then we looked at some basic file IO. So we saw how to write an input and output from simple files. We saw how to read CSVs. We saw how to read JSON, right? So once again, file IO is a huge topic. We did not cover things like pandas. We did not cover a lot of different things, but we looked at the basic facilities for inputting and outputting into files. Finally, we did some hands-on. We built a very simple to-do application in the command line, right? And that class was yesterday. So this is what we have covered so far. This seems that we have made a good amount of progress in a very short amount of time. But let us see what's next to come. Right? Let us see what all things does Python really offer. So I am seeing something in the chat. Can you guys please share the link to the repository? So let me just share this in the chat. All right, I've just pasted the link to the repository in the chat. You will be able to see that there. Perfect. Cool. Let me also share it on the screen, perhaps. So this is the link to the repository. Right? Perfect. Now, what else does Python has to offer? So Python is a large language. Right? Python is not as complicated as something like C++, but Python is still a humongous language. Right? For example, let me quickly show you an example. So if I go to python.org, and if I look at the basic tutorial, right? So I'm going to documentation, I'm going to Python docs, and in that, let me quickly see at the tutorial. So just try to see how large the contents of this tutorial are. Right? So the Python tutorial starts on this. It covers a lot of different stuff. And this is just the tutorial. This is just the basic tutorial. If you look at other things, if you look at the library reference, Python has a huge standard library. Right? Python has a huge standard library for various different things. Right? So Python is a large language, and covering the entire language will take a lot of time. However, that is not what we are here for. Right? So basically, Python offers you a lot of different things, including object-oriented programming. Right? This is a buzzword that you might have heard a lot of different times. All major programming languages like C++, Java, Python, they also provide object-oriented programming. So Python has all those features as well. Python offers classes, it offers abstract classes, things like that. All right. Python, as we said, is a multi-paradigm programming language. So it also offers functional programming. Right. It supports functions and classes as first-class objects. So you can define higher order functions in Python. Now, don't worry if that does not make sense, but Python supports functional programming style. All right. Python has a lot of syntactic sugar. So things like decorators, generators, context managers, and a ton of different functionality that Python provides, which is very powerful, right? And allows us to basically build really complex software in a very simple manner. It allows, so Python is perhaps the most well known for its metaprogramming abilities, right? So very few languages like Ruby, perhaps languages like Lisp, and languages like Perl and Python, they have extremely good metaprogramming capabilities. So Python has all these different things. So it has descriptor protocol, it has meta classes, it has magic methods that allow you to hook into every single part of how an object behaves. Right? Python allows you to hook into imports. Python allows you to do monkey patching and a lot of other things. Right? Python finally has a very large standard library. So Python comes with this concept of batteries included. Right? What this means is that if you basically need to do something with Python, then there should be one standard library that already does that stuff for you. Right? For anything standard that you're going to do, that should be included in the standard library. Right? So for example, Python offers standard library modules for regex. Regex is for pattern matching and doing things. For operating system specific libraries, so for managing files on an operating system, for finding the name of the user, things like that. It has math libraries, so for doing all sorts of complicated math, finding the GCD, taking the log, calculating the sign, so on and so forth. It has the random module, so for generating and working with random distributions. Now notice that the random module is not for cryptographic randomization. So for cryptographic randomization, there's another module in Python. Right, so Python offers CLI features, it offers file IO features, right? A lot of modules for that. It offers a lot of modules for strings, for date processing, for compression, for performance, for logging, for multi-threading, for HTTP, and a ton of different things. Right? Python is a huge language, and this is just the standard library. Right? This is just the standard library. The real power of Python comes from the ecosystem that it provides. Right? So as we discussed at the very beginning, Python has a huge ecosystem, and you will find large segments. You will find large segments with their own set of libraries, right? For example, in the machine learning and data analysis world, you will find libraries like Keras, TensorFlow, NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, a ton of different things, right? Pandas, so on and so forth. There are libraries for DevOps, right? There are libraries for large-scale computing. There are libraries for web frameworks, right? So Python has a huge ecosystem, and if you try to learn all of that, it is going to be a disaster, right? Eventually, it will take you 10 years to learn all of this. Now, this lecture is not to discourage you. Okay, this lecture is not to discourage you, because learning all of these does not really matter. Right? It does not really matter how many language features you know. I see a lot of students who try to basically learn a language, and they try to boast, okay, I know this about this language, I know that about this language, which is perhaps not a good thing. Right? What really matters is what you can build with your skills. Right? Irrespective of how much you know in Python, if you can't build real life applications, if you can't actually put it to use, then all of your knowledge is waste. Right? On the other hand, if you can get the work done, if you can build real life applications, then it doesn't really matter if you know the language very deeply. Of course, knowing the language deeply makes you a better programmer, but the primary goal over here is to get the stuff done. Right? So that is what matters. And let us focus on that. So basically, we want to be able to build things with our skill, and we want to be able to bring positive impact to the world. All right, that positive impact might not be to someone else directly, it might be to our own lives. Right? It could be the case that by learning Python, by learning how to build apps, we improve our own condition. Right? We land perhaps a remote job online. Right? We find a way to pay our bills. So that is what is important, to bring a positive impact in our lives and in other people's lives. Okay, so in that spirit, we are announcing this next thing. So the next series is going to be building real life SaaS applications. So SaaS stands for software as a service. Right? SaaS stands for software as a service. Building real products using Django and Python. All right. So once again, this will be from tomorrow. This will continue from tomorrow. The same time from 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. on the same channel. right, on youtube.com/Skiller Academy. Is that clear, guys? So from tomorrow, we will be starting the Django series. And in the Django series, we will be starting with the very basics of Django. We will introduce Django from the very start. We will talk about what all different things Django offers. And then at the end, we will actually be building an application and we will deploy that application, right? So that you will have a real website that you have built, that other people can use. Okay, perfect, cool. So this is basically about that. Now let me quickly give you a brief idea of why we have chosen Django for this purpose. Right. So now quickly, how many of you have heard of this website called youtube.com? Yes. Yes, no, youtube.com. Yes, of course, you have all heard of it, right? You are on YouTube right now. So YouTube is built in Django. All right. What about a website like Instagram.com? Instagram is also built in Django. Quora, Udemy, Coursera, you've heard of all these. Dropbox, perhaps. Pinterest, Spotify, Bitbucket. You might have heard of NASA, right? NASA's official website is also built in Django. And tons of other websites, right? A lot of major websites are built using Django, not because Django is complicated, right? These smart people have chosen Django because Django is simple and it lets us get the work done in as simple manner as possible. It gives us a lot of power and it also gives us a lot of flexibility. All right. So we will start exploring Django from tomorrow. For now, if you want to learn any of this stuff, that Python offers, then let me quickly share some resources with you. Right. So the best resources, I do not really believe in taking a lot of courses online. Right. I don't suppose that courses online are very well structured. So I would not recommend that you go to Udemy or you go to an academy and take a course there, right? What I would recommend is go to python.org. Go to python.org and read their official tutorial. Go to python.org and read their official standard library. Right? That is what I would recommend. But if you are not too much into reading, so I am kind of a video consuming person. I like watching videos. So for that, you can go to this particular playlist that I have compiled for you guys. So this playlist has a lot of videos. It is not very well organized, but it has a ton of videos regarding Python. Right. So if you go through this playlist, this is a lot. So over here you can see my extension tells me that it has 147 hours worth of content. But everything from the very, very basics of Python to the very, very advanced things in Python, this playlist contains everything. All right. So once again, the link for these are in the lecture notes over here. So if you go to the GitHub repository, you will be able to find the lecture 7 notes, and in this, you will be able to see this playlist in the resources. Okay. So that is it for today. Today is a short session. I know that we are not really going to dive into a lot of details. We just wanted to give you an idea of what all Python has to offer and basically what's to come next, right? What we are going to learn next. All right. Perfect. Prakash is asking which extension do you use for the YouTube playlist thing. So Prakash, that is a custom extension actually. So if you go to Agarwal Pragy, let me just go to my profile. So there was this extension that some person had made, this one, right? So let me go to the original thing. So this is Sridhama/YouTube playlist duration. If you just install this, extension, then you will be able to see playlist durations, right? And let me also just paste this in the chat over here. Perfect. All right. So now let us quickly wait and see if we have any questions, right? Perfect. So if there are any questions, let us please see. So Anuj has a question. Anuj is asking, why not choose Flask? Right. So for those of you who are not aware, Flask is also a web framework for Python. Right. So if I come over here and if I search GitHub for Python, right? If I search all of GitHub for Python and I sort perhaps by the most stars, right? So at the top I will see some libraries: TensorFlow, OMI, ZSH, Notes, something, awesome Python, right? Over here, I see two frameworks over here, right? These are both web frameworks for Python, Flask and Django. Right? Now, currently you see that Flask has more stars than Django. That only happened recently. Till some time ago, Django had more stars than Flask, but Django is still a much more mature and a much more complete framework for building websites, right? Flask, as it says over here, is a micro framework. right? It does not provide a lot of functionality out of the box. It provides a lot of flexibility, so that you can plug and play you can plug and add your own extensions. You can add and customize your things. Django, on the other hand, it provides a lot of core functionality so that you can get the work done, right? So, and over here it says it is for perfectionists, but not just for any perfectionist. It is for perfectionists who have deadlines, who have to actually deliver the product. All right. So that is the reason why we have chosen Flask. All right. Let us see what other questions we have. Can you please say how long this series is going to be? The introduction to Django series. So we are going to have around 7 to 8 lectures in the introduction to Django series. Once again, the length of the series does not really matter. What matters is what the end goal is, right? So we will be introducing Django. We will be going over all the core features of Django. And then towards the end, we will be building our own SaaS product, right? So we will be taking this to-do application that we have built in this particular thing. We will be making it much more fancy. So we will add a database to it. We will add user authentication to it. We will add a Google login to it, and a ton of different things, right? We will add a pretty UI in front of it. So we will be taking this UI application and actually building it into a real product. Okay, and then we will deploy it on Heroku. Is that clear? So don't worry about the length. It is going to be around 7 to 8 lectures. But the end goal is that we are going to have experience of building a real application and deploying it. Perfect. Let us see what other questions we have. Why do competitive programmers prefer C++ over Python? Well, Arjit, that is not really relevant to this stream, but let me quickly answer that question. So C++ has a lot of things that are very nice for competitive programming, right? C++ is extremely fast. Now, if you look at Python can even be 100 times slower than C++, right? For a lot of different things. So, which is why, I mean, in competitive programming, you're trying to create programs that run as fast as possible, which is why people prefer C++. Right? Now, C++ also offers a lot of different data structures that are needed for competitive programming. So Python does not really have any sort of balanced binary search tree implementation. Right? Python's standard library does not have balanced binary search tree implementation, whereas C++ does. Okay. Now, you can add an external library in Python. So one is called sorted containers. I forgot who the author is, but that guy is a great guy. So you can install the sorted containers library and work with something like a BBSD, but it is not provided in the standard library. And as you know, in most online judges, you can't import an external library, right? You can only import what the standard library provides. So you see that C++ is quite common in competitive programming. However, Python is slowly growing in that space. In fact, I do competitive programming in Python myself. Right? Perfect. Let us quickly see if we have any other questions. Praveen is saying, sir, why not start project series? Well, Praveen, we are trying to go towards that. Right? We are trying to go towards that. To build a project, we have to understand the language first, and then we have to understand some framework that allows us to build stuff very quickly. Right? So that is what we did. We started with the language, and next we are going into how to basically understand a framework that is going to allow us to build products very quickly. And once we have these things, then we will be able to quickly churn out as many projects as we want. Right? Ananya is asking, is there any prerequisite? Do we need to have some knowledge of Django? So no, Ananya, we do not have any prerequisite for that. So if you have watched this Python course, that should be enough. Right? All the Python lectures that we have had so far, that should be enough for you. We will be starting from the very basics of Django. All right, including the installation of Django, including setting up the development environment and all those things. All right, perfect. Keshav is asking, should we have prior knowledge of HTML or CSS before starting? Well, Keshav, once again, the knowledge is not required, because whenever we will be doing some HTML or CSS coding, we will actually be introducing those concepts at the moment. Right? So if I try to build a template for you guys, then I will be explaining each and everything as we go along. Right? But of course, it will be nice if you have some basic experience of HTML and CSS. Right? In the software world, the more you know, the better it is. So some experience always helps. Perfect. Sparsh is asking, why do we not study DS and algo subjects with Python? Well, Sparsh, that is a difficult to answer question. And that has mostly to do with the Indian education system. So if you look at MIT, right? You've all heard of MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Well, MIT uses Python to teach the basic programming course. Right? In fact, I can go right now to ocw.mit.edu, and their introduction to if you go to the introduction to programming courses, they are mostly in Python, right? Some universities are using Haskell, some universities are using some other stuff. Indian universities mostly use something like C++ or Java. Right now, it is debatable which is better, which is not better. But I mean, that is all I can say for this particular question. But in my opinion, Python is a great starting language. But Python basically hides a lot of complexities, right? So if you are just into Python, then you will not understand how things like pointers work, right? Perfect. Any further questions? So I suppose that is all. Rohit is asking, Django is programmed in what language? So Django is completely programmed in Python, right? So over here, you see, this is the Django framework. And over here, if you see which language is Django written in, it is written in Python. Right? So you can actually go over here. Django is completely open source. It is completely free. You can look and read the source code of Django yourself. Right? So Django is completely written in Python. There are some other languages that are being used, but most of it is in Python. Right? So some HTML, some JavaScript is being used. Some CSS is being used, some shell is being used, but 97% is in Python. All right. Perfect. So that seems to be most of the questions related to Python and the Django series. So I guess that is it. So once again, guys, make sure that you, if you want to look at the lectures, make sure that you go to this particular URL, the repository, and you will find all the links to the previous notes, previous videos of all the lectures that we have done so far. And you will also be able to, so the Django series itself, we will also be starting on this particular repository itself. Right? So in Scalar Academy, we will create a new repository for Django, and we will continue with that. So once again, tomorrow, same time, 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Right? Introduction to Django. We will start from the very basics, and we will end with building a real life application. Okay. Perfect. So I guess that is it. So see you tomorrow, guys. All right. Bye-bye. See ya.